Hello and welcome to the Lava Academy podcast. We're a team of lava enthusiasts based in Reykjavik, Iceland, and we're going to be bringing you a new episode every month on a topic relating to lava or volcanoes, often with an Icelandic focus. Every month we're going to have volcano news and interviews with a range of guests, from experts in the field to first-hand accounts of eruptions and their human impact. We'll be discussing a range of topics such as plate tectonics, how volcanoes erupt, the current activity on the Reykjanes Peninsula. We'll have an in-depth look at some historical eruptions. We'll discuss how geologists can predict eruptions and how the lives of people can be affected both positively and negatively by volcanoes. We also plan to have regular interviews with guests, from experts in geology and volcanology to ordinary people with first-hand experience of volcanic eruptions. We're part of the team at the Lava Show here in Reykjavik, which is the only live lava show in the world. It's an educational show where we melt lava, pour it into a room full of people, and then explain how various volcanic features form and generally educate people about volcanoes. And like I said, we intend to release these episodes on a monthly basis, so if you're interested in learning more about volcanoes and all things volcanic, you're in the right place. So we would encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, either in iTunes or in your podcast catcher of choice. So before we go any further, it's probably a good idea to introduce the hosts. So my name is Ian McKinnon. I'm originally from the Isle of Lewis in the Western Isles of Scotland. And I was actually a primary school teacher there for 23 years, but with a background in geography, and now living in Reykjavik in Iceland and working at the Lava Show, where I actually get to play with real molten lava every single day. And with me is my co-host, Jón Heiðar Ragnheiðarsson.
Excellent pronunciation, sir.
Thank you.
Well done. My name is Jón. I'm the sales and marketing manager here at Lava Show. So I was born in Akureyri, but I moved to Reykjavik in '92. I studied political science, then public relations. So that basically means I haven't really decided what I want to be when I grow up. But I find everything related to geology, and also the way volcanoes and eruptions have affected people's lives throughout Icelandic history. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, you're a bit of a history buff, are you not?
Yes, that's very true, sir.
So we'll make use of that as the podcast goes on, hopefully. But now that they've met us, I think it's time to bring on our first guest. So we're joined now by our first guest, and that is Madison MacKenzie.
Hi.
Hi, Madison. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been studying and where do you work and that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So I am American. So I moved from the U.S. to Iceland about 6.5 years ago in July of 2018. Prior to that, I was studying at Western Washington University, where I have a degree in geology with a minor in energy sciences. And then once I kind of completed that, geology and energy, what that equates to most of the time is geothermal energy. So when it came to picking a grad school, Iceland was definitely the number one choice. I applied to the school and shockingly got in. At the time, I was 22 years old, and I took the opportunity of, let's just go do it. I'm not going to do this again later in life. So I graduated, hopped on a plane, and then I just never left. That's how I ended up here.
That's pretty cool.
And it's safe to say you have an interest in volcanoes and lava. So what's your history with volcanoes?
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, my dad was in the military. So what that means is that we had to move around all the time. So we moved locations about every 2 to 3 years. And just by happenstance, we always happened to be within the Ring of Fire. So both in the United States and over in Japan. So in Washington, we have 2 different mountain ranges. One of them is volcanic, so that would be the Cascade Mountain Range. So there's large volcanoes, Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, Mount Adams, Mount Shasta, Mount Baker. All of these are part of that large volcanic range that runs down the entirety of the western United States. But growing up, we also lived in Japan for about 5 years, and where we lived was 2 hours away from Mount Fuji, so one of the most famous volcanoes in the entire world. And then I got this interest in Iceland, one of the most active volcanic places in the entire world. So it's just by happenstance I've been surrounded by volcanoes my entire life, and so when it came into geology, it just kind of fit hand in hand.
Can you explain the Ring of Fire, what is that concept precisely?
So the Ring of Fire would be the west coast of both of the Americas. So that would be north and south. The Aleutian Island chain. So that's the little tail chain of Alaska, going down from Russia, coming all the way down to Japan, and then the South Pacific islands there as well. So what it is an extremely, extremely active volcanic area. It is home to approximately, it's an estimation of about 70 to up to 80% of the entire world's volcanoes. And what's happened there is that the Pacific tectonic plate is moving, and it's doing this thing called subduction. It's going underneath other tectonic plates, causing massive volcanic activity where magma and hot material is going to reach its way towards the surface, and also cause a lot of shaking there as well with earthquakes.
So what we're going to try to achieve with our little discussion here is we're just going to do like basically a kind of Lava 101, basics of volcanism. So as things go on with the podcast, we're going to be bringing other guests who are going to go into a lot of detail about a lot of things, but we're just going to kind of shoot for a basic overview today. So how about we start with the simplest thing, or maybe it's not that simple, which is what exactly is a volcano? I mean, how do you actually define it in its simplest terms?
All right, what is a volcano? I mean, yeah, it is kind of a difficult question. It seems very simple, but yeah, it can be difficult because usually when people do think of volcano, it's something that is very, pointy. You get this very picturesque, it's very tall. It has a big crater at the top, perhaps, and it has these massive, big lava fountains and flows that come out of them. That's only one kind of volcano. We have many kinds. Some of them are very, pointy and tall like that, but you have other ones that are very short. Some of them don't look like volcanoes at all. So basically what I would define a volcano as is an opening of the Earth's surface that magma from underground can come up and begin erupting. The initial cracks are usually called fissure volcanoes. At least that's what we call them here in Iceland. This is a type of volcano where it's just a simple crack in the earth and lava starts flowing out of it. So even if it doesn't look like a volcano, it still could be classified as a specific type. And then over time, it can build itself into something more of a classical volcano shape. But ultimately, how I would describe it is just an opening of the Earth's surface in which hot material can come up and begin erupting and building something bigger.
So you actually mentioned two very simple terms there, lava and magma. And through doing the lava show here in Reykjavik, one of the questions that I get asked quite a lot is, what's the difference between the two?
All right, lava versus magma. That's pretty easy. Lava is when it starts erupting above the surface, and magma is when it's still sitting underground. These are Italian words. That's where their origin is from. And yeah, it's just basically describe above or below. So you have a magma chamber beneath a volcano, perhaps. This would be something that would be deep underground, and this is where the liquid rock is going to be sitting until it decides to erupt. And so a magma chamber will begin to erupt lava, and you get lava flows coming out.
So you mentioned Iceland is the most volcanic place in the world. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, sure. It definitely is one of the most. So it's because of the tectonic plates. Tectonic plates are what drives a lot of the Earth's volcanoes to erupt or to form. And so in Iceland, what we have is a diverging plate boundary. This means that we have tectonic plates that are pulling apart from one another. This is the Eurasian plate and the North American plate. This dissecting line runs directly up through Iceland. Now, tectonic plates are moving all the time. They never, ever stop. In Iceland, they are extraordinarily fast. 2 to 3 centimeters per year.
Whoa. Oh my goodness.
That's fast.
So that is incredibly, incredibly fast for plate tectonics. Geological timescales are really funny because, something moving fast is 2 to 3 centimeters. But because of this...
People talk about something being glacially slow, but maybe they should say tectonically slow.
And so while these are moving apart, it's creating, cracks within the earth, and it needs to be filled back in. We don't just have giant chasms that reach to the center of the earth. So in these cracks, the magma from underground will find a pathway up, begin erupting at the surface, and fill it in. And in this way, the country is going to grow. And so that's why we keep moving farther east and farther west in the world, and Iceland is constantly getting bigger.
Oh, I like that. in 100 billion years, we're going to be the biggest place on the planet.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, nice.
But Iceland has a little bit of a double whammy because not only do they have a divergent plate boundary here, we also have a hotspot. So what a hotspot is then kind of this direct line of magma that reaches deeper into the earth, and it just comes straight up to erupt at the surface. They don't move. They are stationary. And this one is thought to be directly beneath Vatnajökull Glacier down in the southeast.
Right.
So not only you have this plate boundary growing it, you also have this other thing going on in the southeast that is adding more and more material. There are several different volcanic systems that are beneath this glacier, and they go off every 3 to 5 years, just adding more material out there as well.
Yeah, it makes things more interesting to have a volcano with, I don't know how many millions of tons of ice on top of it. Makes sure for pretty explosive eruptions. So can you maybe talk about, because when we see volcanic eruptions, sometimes we just see lava basically flowing from some crack in the ground, but sometimes we see explosive events. Can you talk about why that is?
Sure. There could be a few different reasons why you get these different types of eruptions. One of the things that could be affected is what is the type of lava that is being erupted. You can also look at the amount of gases that are coming through the lava. Is there ice? What's the amount of pressure? Has this area ever erupted before? These are all factors that could influence how a volcano is going to erupt. So let's just take, a simple lava flow, something that you often see in Hawaii. So Hawaii has no glaciers, of course, tropical island, and the islands of Hawaii erupt basaltic lava. Basaltic lava is extremely fluid and non-viscous. This just has to do with the chemistry of it. And because there's no ice and there's nothing sitting on top of their volcanoes, the lava is able to easily just come out of the crater and begin flowing on the ground. And then due to its fluidity, it moves actually quite quickly and just spreads around. If you have a volcano that is erupting something that is more viscous, something that is more thick, then it can kind of splatter out. You can kind of think of it as like when you're making pasta sauce on the stove. That's quite
I'm Scottish.
thick.
I was thinking a pot of porridge, but there you go.
But it's something that's really thick. And so if you turn up the heat and you have this steam coming out of it, it's going to begin splattering. So if you have a really thick lava with a lot of gas, as it comes out, it's going to begin to splatter. Splatter means explosion. So you're going to get kind of this sputtering eruption instead.
Is the gas that's in that, is that part of what's actually driving the eruptions along?
It can. It doesn't necessarily drive it. It's just a component of the magma that is underground. There's gases that exist within our Earth all the time, and these gases are just byproduct of the formation of the Earth. As the gases of space came together, they got trapped within, and so these just exist in our Earth. So when you have these conduits that allow the material from inside of the Earth to come out, gas will be one of those materials. So it doesn't necessarily drive the eruption, but it is a component that will always come with it.
I'm very fascinated by volcanoes that happen under glaciers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So that's what we get a lot of the time here in Iceland. 11% of the country is covered by ice, and about half the volcanoes are covered in ice in some sort of way. So when you have glaciers on top, they're kind of acting as plugs a bit. So if the volcano starts erupting, it's not just going to immediately go through. Some glaciers are very big, some are really small. So when you have a volcano that begins erupting, sometimes, most of the time, the lava can't actually burst through immediately. It's going to begin to melt the glacier at first, and then just given the thickness of it, how long it takes. But once you start adding water into lava, it becomes very explosive. The water will instantly turn to steam, which is a gas, and it will begin exploding that lava. This begins exploding the glacier apart as well. So you have exploded lava, you have exploded glacier, you have a lot of this catalyst of water in this lava. So then when the lava is finally able to break through all that ice, you get this massive explosion, massive ash particles because you have exploded lava coming apart. And then you also get these massive, massive floods. The water from the melted ice must go somewhere, and it's going to go down. The biggest danger of this is that these are completely unpredictable. You don't know where they're going to go. You can make educated guesses based off past history, but you don't know where they're going to go. You don't know how long the eruption is going to go on for, so you don't know how much ice is going to melt as well. And it is a lot of material that can come down. These types of floods are really common in Iceland, and they have their own word for it too. So it's a jökulhlaup.
Yeah, I love that word.
And this is actually the official word in geology for a glacial outburst flood.
In Icelandic?
In Icelandic, yes.
Yay.
That is the official word for it. However, most people around the world don't like that word, so they call them glacial outburst floods.
I think that we need to talk to these people. Jökulhlaup is the only word we should be using. Yeah, more Icelandic.
This has to be fixed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Immediately.
So you hear a lot of terms in terms of the what volcanoes, like characterizing volcanoes. So there's you get I've heard shield volcanoes, stratovolcanoes, cinder cones, blah blah blah. What are the kind of differences between those? And I guess if we're speaking within our Icelandic context here, like, do we just have one type here, or do you have multiple types?
Oh, in Iceland, we have multiple types of volcanoes. Definitely not just one or two. We have several. But the difference between them is going to be their shape. And the shape of the volcano is generally determined by what is coming out of it. So a shield volcano, we can start there. A shield volcano is something that the name comes from. It's as if you flipped a shield upside down. So it is very wide, and it looks quite flat. It's not super, super pointy, so you're not thinking of something like Mount Fuji. It's something that is just rounded almost at the top, and it goes out very, very wide. These are the biggest types of volcanoes that you can get.
For some reason, I'm envisioning a gigantic turtle.
Yeah, a little bit, actually. That would actually work as well. We can call them turtle volcanoes.
I like that.
In Icelandic,
it's much cuter.
In Icelandic, that would be Skjaldböku eldfjall.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, very. It rolls
Even
off the
better.
tongue.
It does.
We should make
Perfect.
that the official word.
Yeah. For the win, yeah.
So these are usually born out of extremely runny lavas. So that would be something that would maybe on the more basaltic side of things. So something that's very fluid. And actually the Mauna Loa in Hawaii. So this would be a massive shield volcano, which is the biggest volcano in the world.
So it's basically just blobbing out and finding its own level.
And it just spreads out. Because it's so fluid, it spreads out really, really far. And then they can get tall. It's just less of a dramatic uptick in altitude. It's just more spread out, but they can get very, very large in height. And then you have something called a composite volcano. Composite volcano is also another word for a stratovolcano. They're one and the same.
So strato implies layers, right?
Strato implies layers. And so there is a change. People will use composite because strato isn't technically right because it's not really layers. It is lava piling on top of each other, but strato implies something a little bit more organized, and they're not particularly organized. So I prefer to use the composite volcano. But that one would be more of a classical volcano, something you'd see. They're usually quite pointy. They are going to get very tall, and they are very large. So this would be Mount Rainier, where I'm from in Western Washington. This would be a very nice example of a composite volcano.
It's like a child's drawing of a volcano,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. Here in Iceland, then you would have Hekla. Hekla is a
Right.
composite volcano. So these maybe have a little bit stickier lava. This could also be a little bit more explosive as well, so that when the lava erupts up, it's not really flowing. It kind of just sticks and globs on top of each other, and it just piles in this very steep angle. And then you get this nice pointy top at the peak of it.
Yeah.
But it's not really going to flow anywhere because it's a little bit too viscous. And then you have another one, cinder cone volcano. This is going to be something that's very, very small. It's way, way smaller than anything that people would generally imagine. It's going to be less than 1,000 feet, and it's very cute. It kind of looks like a big crater that's just a little bit taller. Then the fourth kind that we would have here in Iceland, this is a fissure volcano. They do have the nickname in geology. They're called Icelandic volcanoes because they are extremely common here. And a fissure volcano is when you have a diverging plate boundary, usually. You have something ripping apart, and it creates a fissure line, basically a big open crack in the earth where lava just starts to come up and spread out. These can be the beginnings of other types of volcanoes, such as shield volcanoes, but that would take several million years of a fissure volcano erupting kind of in the same spot to be able to build into what would be considered a shield volcano.
So we've got different types of lava as well. So you kind of got the basaltic type you mentioned a couple of times already, but what are the other kind of types of lava?
Yeah, I mean, a volcanologist is going to go a lot more specific in their types of lava. There is going to be
Stay
many
tuned.
times.
More of that
Yes,
to come.
But, if you just take it all the way back to Geology 101, we can look at it kind of as three. And these are determined by chemistry. A lot of it does have to do with content of silica, but other minerals are going to come into play in that as well. So basaltic lava, it typically has less than 55% of silica, and it's also going to have high amounts of iron, perhaps magnesium, and things that are just very, very fluid. This type of lava can get extraordinarily hot as well, just due to its chemistry. Then on the opposite end of that, we can have a rhyolitic lava. This is something that would be extremely thick. We are looking at 65% or more of silica instead. You have high amounts of something called feldspar in there. Lots of sodium, there's calcium. And so all of these things kind of thicken it. It, makes it a more viscous type of lava. And then in the middle, it's like the rosé of lavas. It's andesitic, so it's just kind of a mix of the two. It's just right in the middle.
And we melt basalt here.
We melt basaltic lava here at Lava Show. It's just because it's very runny. We're pouring lava into a room, so we want it to be as runny as possible.
Yeah.
We have such a small amount of lava that we're actually pouring here at Lava Show compared to an actual volcano, so we need to be as fluid as possible.
It's like 150 kilograms, though. I mean, it's
it's still, it's a lot to have in front of you. But if you compare it to one of our last eruptions that we had here on the Reykjanes Peninsula, 150 kilos of lava, that's approximately 50 liters of lava, give or take. Whereas the last eruption we had gave us 50 million cubic meters of lava. So it's kind of a big difference of what we have in the show.
We clearly need to scale up our show. Yeah. This is unacceptable. So can you, like earthquakes, sometimes you get earthquakes here in Iceland, and for the eruption at the Reykjanes Peninsula, we had quite a lot of shaking going on here. It was not always very nice, especially not for the people of Grindavik, who eventually had to evacuate the town. But so we classify earthquakes on the Richter scale. Can you classify volcanic eruptions on something like a scale like that?
Yeah, totally. So for volcanic eruptions, it's usually the VEI. So that's the Volcanic Explosivity Index, is what it's called. Oh. And so this scale runs from...
It's a numerical value for kaboom.
Yeah. Basically, so it's a scale that runs from 1 to 8, 1 being a very nice, very gentle. It's a baby eruption. There's nothing really going on. Or
we call them tourist
dangerous.
Eruptions here in Iceland.
Yeah, and then you have all the way up to 8. 8 is super volcano. That would be destroying everything in its pathway. That would be Yellowstone, could be a VEI of 8. So that would be massive. And so geologists are going to classify volcanoes off of a few factors, but every volcano is going to get a rating like this. If you use like Katla usually erupts around a 4 to a 6, right. And Katla is considered very, very dangerous. So while that number is quite high on the scale, it's not true devastation levels. Not until you get up into the 7 and the 8s is when you're going to be in some real trouble. But, if you have, the nice little gentle ones, if you remember Eyjafjallajökull in 2010, it seemed very massive just because it's stopped all the airplanes in Europe, but that one actually ranked only at a 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
And actually no one even had to evacuate from around the area. So
that's
they were
correct.
actually fine.
Yeah. There was a lot of ashfall though, but it was not very nice. But yeah, you're right. Nobody.
Yeah, and this explosiveness also, this ranking goes up because of the amount of ash as well, and how far that ash can reach. If it's just a small amount, then it may not be ranked very high. If there's large amounts, that can bump it up.
So the situation, maybe touch a little bit on the situation like it is here in Iceland now. We have some magma built up at Reykjanes yet again. We may have Katla and several other volcanoes. Can you talk to me about the way you watch over these volcanoes to make sure they don't give us any nasty surprises?
That's the fun thing about volcanoes, is that they can always give you a surprise.
Right.
It's very difficult to predict nature, especially when the science of volcanoes is very much like in process of trying to figure out, what exactly triggers it. There's not really one singular answer because there's so many things that go on with a volcano. The type of, just even the type of lava or the tectonic setting, that's going to totally change how the volcano is going to act. So what the geologists generally look at, you're going to look at earthquakes, amount of earthquakes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you are able to see where the magma chamber is. You can kind of detect ground heat. Here at Reykjanes Peninsula, for example, they are actually able to see where the magma is sitting underground, and they can actually even see the inflow, the refill rate of this magma chamber. I'm not totally versed in how they do that, but they are able to do it. So that's really cool. That's not the case for every single volcano, though, because this magma chamber in particular is very, very shallow. So it's easy to see. But they'll look at that. They will also look at something called ground deformation, the rises and falls of the surface of the earth, of the ground. Where there's a magma chamber, it could inflate because there's something there. If the magma underground moves, it could cause deflation because it's moving around and now there's a pocket that wasn't filled anymore. They can also
It's a bit like a water bed.
Yeah, a little bit. So it can just kind of move around. And they kind of take all of this type of data. They take some satellite data, they take heat data, and you can make a model. Then someone will estimate when it could happen. But as we know in Iceland, there are many competing theories about if and when a volcano will erupt. This is a very, very non-exact. All you can make is an educated prediction, and that's the best that it is right now, because nature is finicky, and you think it's going to do something, and then it just doesn't, and you just don't know why it just doesn't.
I just want to mention for our non-Icelandic audience that it is a bit of a staple on Icelandic news to drag in some geologist and ask him or her to make a firm prediction of what will happen next, like at some volcanic site. And, it's quite difficult. And I gotta say, I sometimes feel sorry for these people to have to make these predictions. You really being put on the spot.
You get the conflicting ones as well.
Yeah. I mean, and then you have some characters who are very sure, and I'm sure you could have a fun time looking at their prediction and then seeing what actually happened. But
we may be speaking to some of these characters in the months to come.
I look forward to it.
I always think of geologists as kind of like the weathermen of the science world.
It is quite like
they
that,
go up
though.
and they say something, and then the wind changes, and then nothing happens.
I'm gonna say it's like the weatherman, like 100 years ago. Back then, you could have some indication how the weather would be, but you couldn't really make any reliable predictions. But you could act on a hunch, I guess. So it's quite tough.
We had a famous meteorologist back home in the UK called Michael Fish, who there was all sorts of rumours of this huge storm that was going to come through and hit southern England. Yeah. And he went on after the evening news and made this pronouncement. Mm-hmm. Saying that, we've heard that there could be a hurricane coming through, but don't worry, that's not going to happen. Boom.
Oh, God. There is another famous example of the person who was responsible for predicting the weather on D-Day in 1944, and I mean, it must have been the most stressful job in the world, acting on so poor information. But anyway, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, there you go. All right, I think we're basically kind of coming to an end of things here, because I know you're very busy. You've got to get back to your geologying.
Back to the grind, people. Back to the grind. Yeah, exactly.
But I'm going to throw you a quick curveball, because I would like to ask one little question that I didn't prep you for.
Oh my God. I didn't know about this. Yeah. Sorry, Maddie. I didn't know about this.
If you were going to say there's one common misconception that people have about volcanoes, what would it be?
Oh, that's easy. The most common misconception about volcanoes is that volcanic eruption equals massive, massive disaster and death and fire everywhere. A lot of people have this idea about volcanoes because of, Mount St. Helens in 1980 in Washington State. That was the deadliest volcanic eruption in U.S. history. Or Pompeii, for example. Pompeii is a big old famous one that everybody knows about. Everybody gets burned to the ground and there's nothing you can do about it. That is really not the case for most volcanoes. Nowadays, we do have the technology to generally be able to say at least something is going on. You can't say exactly when something's going to happen, but we do have the ability to say, look, something is going on. We should probably evacuate the area. Something might happen. But also, not all volcanoes are like that. And you can live around volcanoes and be totally fine. Here in Iceland, people have been living around them for 1,000 years. Yes, of course, they've caused disasters in the past, but people still live here and we're fine. People have lived in Hawaii for thousands of years and people are fine. So that would I say the biggest misconception is that no matter what kind of volcano it is, everybody dies all the time. And that just really doesn't happen at all.
Well, I'm no expert, but I once heard that volcanoes, they're actually popular to live right next to because the ground the earth is very fertile near them. So it makes for great farmland. But, that's probably a side benefit of living next to a volcano.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And there has been some, archaeological digs that happen in Pompeii and, that have uncovered that there's probably more beneath Pompeii. So it's likely that people lived there before and
it's the
same thing got covered and then created a very fertile land. Everybody forgot about it. And then everybody was like, hey, how come no one has farmed here yet? This is amazing. And then they go back. Volcanic ash is always known to be, like one of nature's fertilizers in the right amount. And that's why people live
lava,
at the
not
base
so
of...
much.
Yeah, lava, not so much. But the ash can be really, really good. That's why people live at the base of Katla. People live at Eyjafjallajökull because... their sheeps have nice grass that, grows down there.
And we all love sheep, so great.
Who doesn't love sheep?
Oh.
And on that slightly peculiar note, thank you so much, Madison, for joining us today. That has been fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right, so huge thanks to Madison for joining us there. That was a fantastic discussion we had there.
Yeah, and if you want to get in touch, just shoot us an email at podcast@lavashow.com.
Yeah, and you can also find out more at our website as well. So it's www.lavashow.com. And we're going to have show notes there for each episode. So we'll maybe have, links and further information about each of the topics we've been discussing. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed the show.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. And we hope to see you again for the next session of the Lava Academy. Bye for now.